In 1876, a young immigrant in Washington made one small tweak to a telephone. He had no idea he just invented the device that would arm dictators, create rock and roll, and power every stage on Earth. For all of human history, sound died in the room where it was made. A king's decree, a general's speech, a singer's voice, gone the moment the air stopped moving. If you weren't there, you simply missed it. Then, in 1876, Alexander Graham Bell proved that the human voice could travel down a wire. It was one of the most stunning demonstrations in scientific history, but his telephone had a serious problem. Bell's transmitter was fragile and faint. You had to shout directly into it, and the sound on the other end was thin and crackling, barely recognizable as a human voice. Emil Berliner had arrived in America from Germany just 3 years earlier, nearly broke, teaching himself science from library books. He was 25 years old. He had no formal training. He had a hunch. Berliner noticed that when two electrical contacts were pressed together loosely, sound waves in the air caused them to vibrate. That vibration changed the electrical resistance between the contacts, and varying resistance varied the current. It was that variation in resistance, not the movement of a membrane alone, that made the difference. More contact meant more current. Less contact meant less. The voice was encoded in electricity itself. Bell Telephone recognized what Berliner had done and purchased his patent rights in 1878 for $50,000, a fortune at the time, and put his transmitter into their telephone network almost immediately. Thomas Edison had independently reached a similar conclusion. He refined the carbon button transmitter, packing carbon granules between two plates. His version became the dominant telephone mouthpiece for the next several decades. In 1878, British scientist David Edward Hughes demonstrated a device that could pick up sound at a distance and applied to it a new name, microphone. The electrical meaning of the word took hold immediately. Through the 1880s and 90s, telephone networks spread across cities and then across oceans. Every handset depended on a carbon microphone transmitter. Berliner's principle was quietly woven into the infrastructure of the modern world. But the telephone was a private conversation. By the 1910s, inventors were asking something more ambitious. Could you broadcast one voice to millions of people simultaneously? The answer was radio. But early radio microphones were the same crude carbon devices built for telephone booths. Broadcasters had to shout. The sound was harsh and hissy, exhausting to hear for more than a few minutes. In the early 1920s, German engineers Walter Schottky and Erwin Gerlach invented the ribbon microphone, a paper-thin strip of metal foil, suspended in a magnetic field, moving with the slightest breath of air. The ribbon microphone transformed what a recorded voice sounded like. It captured sound the way the human ear actually experienced it, warm, present, dimensional. For the first time, a voice in a recording felt like a real person. RCA refined the ribbon design and in 1931 released the RCA 44, a gleaming chrome cylinder that became the most recognizable microphone in history, hanging in virtually every serious broadcast studio on Earth. By the early 1930s, radio had a global audience numbering in the hundreds of millions. For the first time in human history, one person's voice could enter every home on a continent simultaneously. Certain people noticed this new power very carefully. One of them was a failed painter turned politician in Munich, who had discovered that his voice, amplified before a crowd, did something extraordinary to people. At the Nuremberg rallies, Adolf Hitler's speeches were routed through a vast loudspeaker network engineered by Albert Speer. The microphone didn't just amplify his words, it made them feel like they came from everywhere at once. Sound engineers shaped Hitler's broadcast voice adding reverb, adjusting the mix, to project inevitability and authority. The microphone was not a neutral tool. In the right hands, it was an instrument of mass persuasion. Franklin Roosevelt understood the microphone completely differently. His fireside chats, 30 broadcasts between 1933 and 1944, spoke quietly and directly into the living rooms of a frightened nation. Winston Churchill's wartime broadcasts, delivered in that granite, deliberate cadence, were heard live by tens of millions. The microphone had made the leaders voice the pulse of the nation itself. The war ended. The microphone had proven it could move masses, but musicians had been watching, and they saw something quieter, more intimate, and perhaps more lasting in what this small device could do. Before the sensitive microphone, performance demanded projection. Opera singers, stage performers, vaudeville artists, your voice had to fill a hall unaided. It demanded a powerful, somewhat artificial delivery trained entirely for distance. With the ribbon microphone and the radio studio, you could lean in close and barely whisper. The microphone heard everything. Softness became power. Intimacy became performance, and crooning was born. Frank Sinatra understood this better than anyone alive. He treated the microphone as a co-star, pulling it close for tenderness, holding it back for drama. His whole career was built on the language of proximity. By the 1950s, the microphone had become visual as well as sonic. When Elvis Presley coiled around a mic stand on national television in 1956, it wasn't just technical, it was choreography. Rock and roll as a genre would be physically impossible without the microphone. Not just to hear the singer, but to shape the sound, to create something that could never exist acoustically in any room. In the early 1960s, producers like George Martin began placing microphones inches from every voice and instrument. That intimacy created a new kind of sound, warmth, and detail that had never existed on a record before. In 1966, Shure released the SM58, a dynamic microphone built for live performance. Rugged, consistent, and affordable, it became the most used microphone in recorded history and still holds that title today. A dynamic microphone works like a speaker in reverse. Sound waves push a diaphragm attached to a wire coil inside a magnetic field. Moving that coil generates electrical current. That current is your signal, traveling down the cable. Studio engineers preferred the condenser microphone, a more sensitive design using a charged capacitor. It captured finer detail and higher frequencies. Virtually every record you've ever loved was tracked through one. Through the 1970s and 80s, microphones shrank. The lavalier, a tiny clip worn on the lapel, let news anchors, politicians, and actors move freely while staying live. The mic had become invisible. Wireless microphones, using embedded radio transmitters, became standard in the 1980s. Concert tour grew to fill stadiums. Performers roamed enormous stages without a single cable holding them in place. In the 1990s, engineers etched a functioning microphone onto a silicon chip smaller than a fingernail. The MEMS microphone, microelectromechanical systems, could be manufactured in bulk for just a few cents apiece. The phone in your pocket likely has 3 or 4 MEMS microphones, one for your voice, one for noise cancellation, one for the rear camera, one listening in the background for your voice assistant. By some estimates, over 2 billion MEMS microphones are produced annually. They are among the most manufactured electronic components on the planet, and almost no one who uses them knows they exist. Today, in the esports arena, the caster's microphone is as central to the spectacle as the game itself. Commentators at League of Legends World Championship reach peak audiences in the tens of millions, all still riding Berliner's principle. On a K-pop stage in Seoul, Singers in wireless in-ear monitors perform before tens of thousands, while mixing engineers in a production truck shape every vocal nuance in real time. The chain from Berliner's workbench is unbroken. In a bedroom somewhere right now, someone is speaking into a USB condenser microphone, and within seconds their voice is on a global network. No studio, no broadcast license, just the microphone and an internet connection. Every microphone ever built, from the RCA44 to the chip in your laptop, operates on the same insight. Moving air can modulate an electrical signal, and that signal can travel anywhere without limit. Emil Berliner made his discovery in a rented room with borrowed equipment. He was a self-taught immigrant who read physics textbooks for pleasure and tinkered with electrical contacts in the hours after his day job. He could not have imagined his loose carbon contact becoming the instrument of Nuremberg's rallies and Roosevelt's calm. He couldn't have seen Elvis on television or heard Sinatra lean into the mic like it was a confession. The microphone is the most used instrument on Earth and also the least noticed. It lives inside every phone call, every film, every song, every speech, every podcast, every voice command ever spoken. From the Greek, microphone means small voice. But what Berliner gave the world was precisely the opposite. It gave every human voice the chance to be enormous, to travel without limit, to outlast its owner entirely. One immigrant, one rented room, one loose electrical contact. That is the entire origin of the thing that made the modern world audible. It is almost too small a beginning to believe. This is Origins. Subscribe and come back tomorrow. There's a new origin every single morning.